Hey everyone, welcome to Read and Recap. Today we will be summarizing Volume 3 of Pride and Prejudice, the novel by Jane Austen. This is a 3-volume series with each volume summarized in one video. If you haven't watched Volume 1 and 2, you can check them out from the links in the description. This video will be the end of this 3-volume series of the novel. So grab a seat, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and let's dive right in.
Summarizing Volume 3 of Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Volume 3 focuses on the resolution of the key romantic relationships and the moral and social lessons that have been building throughout the novel. The first 2 volumes of Pride and Prejudice introduce us to the main characters and set the stage for the romantic tensions that will be resolved in Volume 3. Elizabeth Bennet, the novel's intelligent and witty heroine, meets Mr. Darcy, a wealthy and proud gentleman. Although initially attracted to him, Elizabeth's strong prejudice against Darcy is influenced by her first impressions in the lies told to her by Mr. Wickham, a charming but unscrupulous officer. In Volume 2, Elizabeth receives a marriage proposal from Mr. Darcy, but she rejects him, accusing him of ruining her sister Jane's romance with Mr. Bingley and mistreating Mr. Wickham. Darcy responds with a letter, explaining his actions and revealing Wickham's true character. This letter begins to change Elizabeth's feelings, and she realizes she may have misjudged Darcy. However, other complications, including the behavior of Elizabeth's family and Darcy's pride, continue to stand in the way of their relationship. Chapter summaries of Volume 3. Chapter 43. Elizabeth Bennet is visiting Pemberley, Darcy's estate, with her aunt and uncle, the Gardeners. Elizabeth is struck by the beauty and grandeur of the house and grounds, and she starts to appreciate Darcy's wealth and good taste. While walking around Pemberley, Elizabeth unexpectedly meets Mr. Darcy, who has returned home earlier than expected. To Elizabeth's surprise, Darcy is very civil and polite, showing none of the pride she associated with him before. Darcy offers to introduce Elizabeth to his sister, Georgiana, and Elizabeth is left to wonder about his growing kindness and his feelings toward her. Chapter 44. Elizabeth, the Gardeners, and Darcy meet Georgiana at Pemberley. Georgiana is shy but seems pleased to meet Elizabeth. Bingley, who is also visiting Pemberley, is clearly still fond of Jane Bennet, but Elizabeth does not know whether this renewed contact will lead to anything. Elizabeth notices Darcy's behavior, kind, attentive, and markedly different from their earlier encounters. His actions begin to make Elizabeth reconsider her feelings toward him. Chapter 45. Elizabeth and her aunt and uncle are invited to dine at Pemberley. Miss Bingley, jealous of Darcy's interest in Elizabeth, tries to belittle her, but Darcy defends Elizabeth in subtle ways. Elizabeth sees Miss Bingley's attempts to put her down and becomes even more aware of Darcy's growing respect and affection for her. By the end of the evening, Elizabeth realizes her feelings for Darcy have begun to change. She no longer sees him as the proud, arrogant man she initially thought him to be. Chapter 46. Elizabeth receives a letter from Jane, informing her of the distressing news that Lydia, their youngest sister, has run away with Wickham. This is a scandalous situation, as Wickham has no intention of marrying Lydia, and it threatens to ruin the reputation of the entire Bennet family. Elizabeth is mortified and worries about how Darcy will react. She feels that this news will end any possibility of a future with Darcy, as her family's disgrace would be too much for him to overlook. Chapter 47. Elizabeth returns home immediately, accompanied by the Gardeners. On the way, she reflects on the consequences of Lydia's actions and the potential damage to her family's reputation. She also regrets how Wickham's true nature was not exposed earlier. Elizabeth blames herself for not warning her family about Wickham, given what Darcy revealed in his letter. Elizabeth also feels an overwhelming sense of loss at the thought that Darcy, whose regard she now values, might be lost to her forever because of her family's disgrace. Chapter 48. Back at Longbourn, the Bennet family is in a state of panic and disarray. Mr. Bennet has gone to London to search for Lydia and Wickham, but there is little hope that the couple will be found or that Wickham will marry Lydia. Mrs. Bennet is hysterical, and Elizabeth tries to console her mother while worrying about the fate of her family. Meanwhile, Mr. Gardiner is helping in the search, and Jane continues to be the calming presence in the household. The gravity of Lydia's actions and its potential to ruin the family's social standing weigh heavily on Elizabeth and Jane. Chapter 49. The Bennet family receives word that Lydia and Wickham have been found, and Wickham has agreed to marry Lydia, on the condition that Mr. Bennet provides a financial settlement. The family is relieved, though Elizabeth and Jane are suspicious about how this sudden resolution was arranged. They assume that their Uncle Gardiner must have provided a significant amount of money to Wickham, but Elizabeth suspects there is more to the story. Chapter 50. Elizabeth reflects on the situation and realizes that the marriage, while saving her family from disgrace, is still problematic. Lydia will now be tied to the untrustworthy Wickham for life. Elizabeth is particularly concerned about how Darcy will view the situation, and she resigns herself to the fact that any possibility of marriage to Darcy is now lost. She blames Lydia's thoughtlessness and her parents' poor judgment in allowing Lydia to go to Brighton, where she met Wickham. Chapter 51. Lydia and Wickham return to Longbourn as a married couple, and Lydia is completely oblivious to the severity of her actions. She is more interested in boasting about her marriage than in reflecting on the scandal she caused. During a private conversation with Elizabeth, Lydia inadvertently reveals that Darcy was present at her wedding. This revelation shocks Elizabeth, and she writes to Mrs. Gardiner to ask for more details. Chapter 52. Elizabeth receives a letter from Mrs. Gardiner, explaining that Darcy was responsible for arranging Lydia and Wickham's marriage. Darcy tracked down the couple, paid off Wickham's debts, and convinced him to marry Lydia. Elizabeth is overwhelmed by Darcy's generosity and selflessness, especially since he did all this quietly and without seeking recognition. This act deepens Elizabeth's feelings for Darcy, and she realizes that he is a man of true honor and integrity. Chapter 53. Mr. Bingley returns to Netherfield, and it quickly becomes clear that he still has feelings for Jane. His behavior is attentive and affectionate, and Jane, though cautious, is hopeful that their romance might be rekindled. Elizabeth suspects that Darcy had a hand in Bingley's return, as it was his earlier interference that caused the separation between Jane and Bingley. Darcy, however, is more reserved during his interactions with Elizabeth, leaving her uncertain about his feelings. Chapter 54. Bingley proposes to Jane, and she happily accepts. The engagement is a source of great joy for the Bennet family, though Mrs. Bennet is much more vocal in her excitement than Jane or Elizabeth. Jane is deeply in love with Bingley, but she remains modest and humble about the engagement. Elizabeth is thrilled for her sister but cannot help wondering about her own prospects with Darcy, especially since his actions have been so generous and honorable. Chapter 55. Lady Catherine de Bourgh makes an unexpected visit to Longbourn. She demands to speak with Elizabeth and, during their conversation, accuses Elizabeth of trying to marry Darcy. Lady Catherine is outraged by the idea that Elizabeth, with her inferior social status and connections, could aspire to marry her nephew. Elizabeth refuses to be intimidated and firmly denies Lady Catherine's right to dictate her actions or feelings. Lady Catherine leaves, furious, but her visit only strengthens Elizabeth's resolve to be true to herself and her feelings. Chapter 56. After Lady Catherine's visit, Darcy returns to Longbourn. He and Elizabeth finally have a private conversation, during which Darcy confesses that his feelings for her have not changed. He explains that, despite the obstacles in her family's situation, he still wishes to marry her. Elizabeth, in turn, expresses her gratitude for his role in Lydia's marriage and admits that her feelings for him have changed. Darcy proposes again, and this time Elizabeth joyfully accepts. Chapter 57. Elizabeth and Darcy's engagement is met with mixed reactions from their families. Mr. Bennet is surprised but pleased, while Mrs. Bennet is initially shocked by the news but quickly becomes excited by the prospect of such a wealthy son-in-law. The news of the engagement also reaches Lady Catherine, who is furious, but she is powerless to stop the marriage. Chapter 58. The novel ends with the happy marriages of Elizabeth and Darcy, and Jane and Bingley. Darcy and Elizabeth's union is one of mutual respect, understanding, and love. Their marriage represents the triumph of true affection over social expectations and prejudice. Jane and Bingley, though less complex in their personalities, also find happiness together. Themes and character development in Volume 3. 1. Growth and transformation. One of the central themes of Volume 3 is the personal growth of both Elizabeth and Darcy. Elizabeth learns to overcome her prejudice, acknowledging her earlier misjudgments about Darcy and Wickham. Darcy, in turn, learns to overcome his pride and becomes more open to understanding and accepting Elizabeth's perspective. Their development as individuals allows them to form a strong, respectful partnership. 2. Social class and marriage. Throughout the novel, Austen critiques the rigid social hierarchy of her time. Volume 3 emphasizes the limitations that social class places on individuals, especially women, in their pursuit of happiness. Elizabeth's refusal to marry Darcy initially was partially driven by her concerns about his pride and his treatment of her family. By the end of the novel, however, both characters rise above these societal constraints, choosing to marry for love rather than status. 3. Family and reputation. Lydia's elopement with Wickham serves as a major crisis in the novel, illustrating the fragility of reputation, particularly for women. The Bennet family's social standing is endangered by Lydia's actions, and it is only through Darcy's intervention that they are saved from complete disgrace. This subplot reinforces the importance of reputation and the dangers of impulsive behavior in a society that places great value on propriety. 4. The importance of integrity. Darcy's actions in securing Lydia and Wickham's marriage, done without seeking praise or recognition, reveal his true character. His integrity contrasts sharply with the superficial charm of Wickham, whose selfishness and lack of honor are fully exposed by the end of the novel. Elizabeth, too, proves her integrity by refusing to be cowed by Lady Catherine and by holding out for a marriage based on mutual respect and love. Conclusion. Volume 3 of Pride and Prejudice brings the novel to a satisfying resolution, with the central relationships of Elizabeth and Darcy, and Jane and Bingley, solidified through personal growth, self-awareness, and a deepening of their mutual respect. Through its witty, incisive commentary on social class, reputation, and marriage, Austen offers a timeless critique of societal expectations, while celebrating the power of love and personal integrity.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more awesome content. And to make sure you never miss an upload, tap the notification bell so you're always the first to know when new videos drop. If you want to listen to Volume 2, you can check out the video right here. You can also find links to purchase the book in audio, PDF, or hard copy from the links in the description. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.